This video is how I made an organizer for Warhammer Underworlds Wyrdhollow. By no means is this the perfect way to make an organizer. It's just some ideas that I wanted to share with you guys on how I made it, and I made everything fit inside the box here. This is a Be a Hero gaming channel, and it's about how to play games and have fun, and also how to be a hero in real life. And as I've stated in some of my other board game organizer videos, try to challenge yourself in your lives. If you feel like things are getting monotonous or easy, try to do something that's hard you don't think you're capable of, and maybe you'll make some mistakes, maybe you'll fail at it, but at least it'll be a learning experience for you, help you grow, help you progress. And you know, again, let's not just progress in our games, let's try to progress in real life too. So hopefully you guys are doing that. You're finding ways that you can be a hero in real life and be just a little bit better to challenge yourself. That's what I did with this game. And as I mentioned before, the more difficult these organizers get to make, it gets a little more difficult to do the videos too. It's really hard to explain how I made the organizer, but hopefully you can follow along with this and get some ideas for your own organizers when you make your games. Again, if you want to see some of the earlier videos, I won't show them here, but I just used foam board, a razor knife, a metal ruler, and a pencil, and one of those craft cutting mats to make sure all my angles were exactly 90 degrees. So if you want to see exactly the materials I use, you can go back and check out one of those other videos. But Wyrdhollow was an interesting project because there's miniatures in this game. And again, this organizer isn't perfect, but I just kind of want to show you what I did here and how I managed the miniatures. So with this game, again, you'll see here we have the manuals on top here. We have the board. And then this is the thing that just really drove me crazy about this game was you can see here how everything's just kind of piled in here. If the box tips on its side, these cards get mixed together, and you know, the miniatures kind of all pile on top of each other. These aren't painted yet, luckily, and so you don't have to worry about any paint chipping or anything, but once they are painted, I wanted a way to isolate them so that they're not going to be rubbing up against the other miniatures. And again, there's also these bags they give you here, and they actually don't give you enough bags for what is required for this game. And again, this flimsy little cardboard thing in here that doesn't really do much. But again, I just want to show you here, inside these bags, you'll see there's several different kinds of tokens in here. And I can't even remember if these even came with the game. Maybe they did. I can't remember. Anyway, I think they did. But, and again, you have all these bags to pop open here. And then once you get the bags open, you got to sort through here. And okay, let's split up all the tokens here. And then you spend a good deal of the time splitting up all the tokens. And I guess one solution to this could be just get more bags, and you could just, you know, fill up a whole bunch of little bags with all of the tokens. But then the issue becomes you have to put them all back in all these individual bags, and it's just such a pain to put them in the bags and make sure they're all sorted out. But then when you play the game, you have these piles of tokens spread out all around the gaming area, and it takes up a lot of space on the table. And again, the setup and teardown just becomes really cumbersome when you have all these tokens. Again, this bag has all kinds of tokens inside of it, and all mixed together. And so when you go to set the game up, here you are trying to sort out all these tokens to get ready to play the game. So an organizer is a great idea for especially a game like this, where you can have it all already out and set out and ready to play. And again, my first thought, a couple of thoughts behind the process of making these organizers is this. All these tokens is a really big deal to me because I want a way to have these all organized ahead of time to make it easier to use them in the game, and also for cleanup and setup of the game. That's one part of it, but mainly I just get annoyed having to sort all these tokens out before you play the game. And then when you use the tokens, you got to throw them back in these piles, and they just take up a lot of space on the table. Okay, so now it took me that long to sort all these tokens out, and now we could start playing the game here after we get all the rest of the stuff out of the box here. So I just want to kind of slide this stuff off to the side here. And then also in here, then there's another bag for the dice. And so you got to pop this bag open, dump all the dice out. I'll show you in a second, but when I was making the organizer, I had set this aside off to the side and was almost done with the organizer and completely forgot about these. And so luckily I wasn't finished yet and thought, oh, I got to get these tiles into there somehow. And luckily I was able to find a way to do that. I'll show you here once we get to that part there. Okay, so again, how do I start thinking about this? Number one is a tray for the tokens and dice. So I can just take the tray out of the box. I can just pull that right out of here and set it next to the game, and away we go. We start playing. That's the first thought. And then the other thought is how am I going to organize these cards and other items into the box? Again, I could stand these up on an end, but you can't see this here. That is flush exactly with the top of the box. So if I put a piece of foam in the bottom of this, it's going to be too high. This is going to stick up above the box. So this is probably not an option if I put foam in the bottom of the box. So something else to think about is how you're going to stand the things up. Also, the models. Here, I'll take some of these out of here so I can show you this here. But most of these Tzeentch models are pretty short and would probably fit standing upright. But some of these other Age of Sigmar guys here, I can't remember what these are called. Some kind of wizard, I can't remember. Anyway, these guys you can clearly see here. If I stand them up, this guy's a bad example. But this guy's staff is going to just about poke up over the edge of that. So there's really probably no way I'm going to be able to stand this guy up. He's probably going to have to lay down. So that's something else I start thinking about. So let's take this flimsy thing out of here that does absolutely nothing for us. And I'll use the back of the box as an example here on how I start trying to plan this out. The first thing I did was laying out all the models to see where they're going to fit. And I just started out by laying these guys down like this. Can I fit all three of these guys like that? Yes, just barely. Okay, so those guys can go right there. Now, what about the Tzeentch guys? This guy is probably the tallest model in the set, this four-armed guy here. That's pretty cool. So he's going to have to lay down for sure. But all of his buddies here, I was going to lay them down, and I even thought about maybe doubling them up side to side, but I found out if I got them in here really tight, I could actually fit all of them in here in a line and still have enough room for a little piece of foam in between each one of them to make a separate compartment. Okay, so there's all the models. They're all in here. Awesome, wonderful. They all fit in here. My second thought was, okay, what to do with the rest of this space? Again, I knew I wanted to have a pull-out container to put all these tokens in. And so my first initial thought was, well, maybe I'll just stack these cards up and put them right there, and then stack up the two player decks. I sleeve these just because when you shuffle them, it doesn't wreck the cards there. And you can clearly see where these guys start and where these guys start here. So you can just stack those up. I thought maybe I'll just do them like that, and then with whatever I have left over here, I will put the tokens in there. Well, the issue became there's, as you can see, a lot of different kinds of tokens over here. In fact, I think there's 7 if you count these few purple ones here, and then the turn markers here, and the dice. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And so thinking about 7 small compartments along here, they'd have to be really little to fit 7 compartments. Not only would they be little, but they would be deep. And so, especially for the dice or these tokens, we only have a few of them. If I had a really deep well that those drop down inside, they might be kind of hard to dig my hand down in there and get them out of there. And so I thought, well, maybe that's not a good idea to make those the depth of the box and make 7 tiny containers that are deep. It would make the pull-out container more narrow, so it would fit better along the board. But I just didn't want to be digging inside of there. So then my next thought was, well, what about if I took these like this and laid them down like this and did a pull-out container on top of this? Because you can see here that these are not very thick, and even with the sleeves on them, they're not much thicker. And so if I put these like that, I could put another container and set it on top of there, and that I could pull out, and then that would reveal the cards, and I could take the models out. Now, the other thing you have to factor into this is the board and the manuals. And it just so happens that the board, again, I don't know if you saw some of the other videos I did, but the board was smaller than the box. Okay, so this board is clearly smaller than the box. So when you make the outsides of the organizer, you could go right up to the edge because the board will fit down inside of that as long as you make the organizer sections inside lower than the edge. But the issue is the rule book is exactly the size of the box. This is the lid, so it's a little bit bigger. But if you put this inside the box here, the rule book is exactly the size of the box. So with that in mind, the edges of the organizer need to come down just a little bit so that I can fit the rule book on the top of the box before I put the lid on. So what I did was I made a little recessed area for the board to fit down inside, and then the edges of the board were slightly higher that would be level once the board was in there to fit the rule book on top. And let me just show you how I did that here. And again, I wish I could just cut the whole thing out and show you exactly how I did it, but there was a lot of thinking and recutting and redoing things because the first couple of times I did it, it didn't really work. So I'll take all these guys off of here, and we'll show you what we came up with here. One thing I was worried about is, and this is why I had to redo a couple of things. Even if I laid the model down, I looked to the side to see, okay, how much room am I going to need to stack the board on top once the model's in there and still have room for the rule book on top of that. I did not want the model to be crushed. And so because of that, I didn't put a bottom piece where the models sit. Let me show you what I mean. So we'll flip the box back over here. This is what I mean here. So here I made these containers for the cards to fit the 4 stacks of cards in here. And on this side, I didn't put a bottom on this just to give me a little bit more room to fit the models in here, just so that the models weren't going to stick up too high and get crushed when I put the stuff on top of here. That would be a disaster to paint those all up nice and then have them be ruined because you stuck a board on top of it. So again, this piece fits inside, and this, I guess I didn't have to glue this together. I could have made these 2 separate pieces, but this is not gonna come out of the box. This is gonna stay in, and I'm only gonna take out the tray with the tokens. So slip that down inside of there. And again, I started out, just as I explained in the other videos, with a piece covering the entire bottom. And once I realized I wasn't gonna have a bottom for this side, I just cut that piece off after I found out what kind of space I needed for the cards. I tried to make the cards as tight as possible just so that I would leave a lot of room for the models, because I didn't want the models to be cramped, but I also wanted them to fit well so they weren't banging around in here. So again, that's just a matter of laying everything out on the board and seeing where it fits. Because the cards fit tight in here, this is one idea I never tried before. I made a little notch right here so you can reach down and pull the cards out of the box. Because once they fit kind of tight down in there, they get a little bit tricky to get your finger down in. I guess there's enough room to get in there, but they get a little tricky to get your finger down in there to get the cards out. So if you do a notch like this where you have cards, it gives you a little bit more room to get your hand down in there and pull the cards out. Just makes it a little bit easier to do that. So that's one idea there. That goes to this. Okay, so we have those down in there, and then these are the Rivals decks, which are, again, just some extra abilities that you can cycle into your decks if you want to. We haven't even opened those yet. We've only played this game a handful of times, but it's going to get played a lot more now that it's in this box, and now that we don't have to go opening up a whole bunch of Ziploc bags. Now, what I was mentioning earlier, I had finished this part, and I was starting to make this part when I realized I didn't make a compartment for these. I'd completely forgotten about them, and I found them over off on the side of the table and thought, oh shoot, I hadn't made a spot for these yet. And so what I did was I just moved the model slot over a little bit to make this slot right here, where these will now just fit right down inside of here like that. And it just so happened that those down inside of there is the exact same level as what I made the box. So every now and again, I guess you get lucky there, that those can fit right down inside of there. I don't have to open up a Ziploc bag. I can just reach in and take these out and set them on the board, and away we go. Now, the model slots here were a little bit tricky just because, again, I was just barely able to get the models to fit inside these slots. And an issue might be, again, these rattling around in here if they're painted and maybe chipping the paint. A couple of ideas that I have seen or that I had thought of to remedy that is I have seen people before where they put, they glue a couple magnets to the bottom of here and then glue a little piece of sheet metal right there, and then this guy will just magnetize right to that, and that will keep him from rattling around. Another idea is you can get some pieces of soft foam or maybe bubble wrap and just kind of set them inside of here just to keep the model braced and so it's not rattling around. Hopefully you're not shaking your boxes around anyway. But that would give the models just a little bit more stability inside the box and keep them from rattling around or coming loose. So again, to figure out where these guys would fit, I just laid them on the box. I didn't even measure any of this. I just laid them out, and this piece here, once I knew how tall I needed to make it, I just stuck it to the end, made a mark on it, and that's where I cut it off. And with the models in place, I just glued it down inside of there just to see where I needed to fit to get in between all the models here. And then the same thing here. I saw where I needed to put this to make just enough room for this guy. I glued it in, and then I took this guy out. I put this guy in, and to see where I need to put the next one, glued it in, and just each guy, I just glued them in, made it as tight as I could so that all of these would fit inside of there. And again, I mean, they're pretty stable inside of there. You know, they're not gonna move around a whole bunch, a little bit, but again, you could take a piece of bubble wrap or foam, stick it on top of there, or again, the sheet metal and the magnets, and this guy would stick right to that, and then it wouldn't move around at all. So that's one idea once they're painted, but at least this way they're not banging into each other. At least this way they're stable and not running into each other. And then I have this other tray here, again, that comes out. It's just gonna fit right down the side of there like that. And this is what I was talking about earlier. Let me show you this here. So here I have a recess for the board. The board's gonna sit right on top of here. And then another little bit, not quite to the top, for the rule book, okay? The board is smaller than the box, so the board will fit inside the outside edges. So I just made all the inside dividers a little bit lower so that, you can see here again, just a little bit lower so the board would fit inside of there. And how did I figure that out? Well, once I knew how tall to make this to fit the rule book, I kind of started from the top and worked down. Once I knew how tall to make this to fit the rule book, I thought, okay, well, how much further do I need to go down to fit the board? So I just took the boards like this and just measured how big they were and just made it a tiny bit bigger. So I would make sure the boards weren't sticking up too high. And then that's how far down I made this for these inside pieces here. But now this way, and again, this is the same thing. I didn't really measure these. I just knew that most of the tokens that I had were these, I think they're called glory tokens. These glory tokens, when you defeat an enemy or achieve an objective, I wanted a big well for those because there was a lot of those. And so I thought, well, maybe since I need 7, I'll make 1 and then 3 and 3. I made these really small so I could put these tokens over here that there's not very many of. They're going to come out to be used as turn markers, and you really don't need very much room for those. And again, I just kind of took a look here. What's going to fit inside of here? Well, I need to go a little bit bigger. I just set 1 token inside of there to see how big to make this. I glued that one, and then I glued the next one in the same spot to fit these over here. And then for these final 2 compartments here, let me back up a little bit. So once I did this one here, I just measured this and just eyeballed it right in the middle and glued it on there. And then same thing with these 2. I just kind of eyeballed them, glued them right in the middle to make these equal size there. Now these dice can fit in there. Let's see, these are 2 separate piles here. Get all these tossed into there. And these, I guess you wouldn't really have to separate these. They're all action tokens, but they're different kinds of action tokens, so I kind of wanted them to be separate just because I was able to. These damage tokens, you can see some of them on the back have these blue markers and some have the yellow markers. So these, I really didn't want to split these up, as you can just clearly see that they're all damage markers, and I think these are just generic markers for the game. So now we've gotten rid of all of the plastic bags, and when I'm ready to play, you can just, again, take your models out. This tray is just gonna slide out and is gonna go next to the game board. It's a little bit wider than I wanted it. I thought the narrow one would be nice, but again, you can see here, it's not very deep. And so it's really easy to grab the tokens out of here because it's not very deep. And I worried about that narrow one being really deep, so I'm reaching down inside of there trying to get things out of a narrow, deep well would be a little bit trickier. And these shallow ones are just a lot easier to grab the pieces out of. And this way you don't have these piles all the way around the board, which was how we played. And it just became a real headache to have these piles everywhere. Someone would bump one and they would get spread around the table. And this way, again, you put your glory tokens back, you just toss them in here. You put your turn markers back, they go in here. And these overlay tiles here can just slide inside of there. And this tray goes back in there like that. Again, the middle's recessed just enough so when I stick these boards in there, now they are flush with the edge of this. A little bit big here, but that's fine. But they fit just right on the sides there. And there's just enough room on the top to stick the rule book, which you can see pretty much goes right to the edges of the box. So now that the rule book's inside there, right to the edges of the box, we can pop the lid on, and everything fits neatly inside of there. Everything has something covering it, so if you do put it on its side to store it or on the end or something like that, you're going to pop the lid back off and everything's still going to be organized and in its place in here because there's really no room for it to flop around inside there. This is actually nice here. It's actually able to get the boards out with that little space there. Everything's right there inside of this compartment. So I hope this is helpful, guys. Again, something that I learned from this that I'd never tried before is, again, having this little extra slot out of here to make the cards easier to get out. When you're putting your models in here, just set them on there and see what kind of space you need to put these dividers on there. You can also store pieces vertically like this in a little slot. This I just did by accident because I forgot to make a little compartment to put these in. And it worked just fine. I was able to move this over just a little bit and stick them right in there. And there's plenty of room for it to fit. And then, everything fits right back on top of here. I hope this is helpful. I hope it gives you some ideas for your own organizers, for your own games. And I hope you guys are challenging yourselves, looking for areas which you can improve, or do something hard where you might make some mistakes, but that's how we learn, that's how we progress. You guys have fun playing games, be heroes, and take care.